This program is called Codependency as an Addiction. It fits into the 2025 view of addiction and is a revised way of looking at codependency. It's also based on a 2025 view of attachment, a different look at attachment theory. So we'll have a look at how this works in this course. This program is split over 3 modules. The first module looks at the conventional view of attachment theory and the conventional view of codependency. We then move on in module 2 and have a look at attachment theory, 2025 version. And then in the third module, we'll have a look at codependency theory, 2025 version, which fits in with the addiction model. The general view of attachment theory is that there's 4 types of attachment: secure attachment, anxiously attached, avoidantly attached, or disorganized attachment. In this particular theory of 2025, we're not interested in which type of attachment it is, other than it's not secure attachment, doesn't involve addictions. But any of the other 3 types of attachment could involve addictions: anxiously attached, avoidantly attached, or disorganized attachment. I'm not going to read through those. You can read through those if you want to get a better understanding, but it's not relevant to the 2025 version of attachment theory, which we're talking about in this course. In this slide, we're looking at codependency in relationships, and we're looking at the traditional view of that. So the next 4 slides will talk about codependency, what it is, signs and symptoms, causes of codependency, and how it relates to addictions. What is codependency? Codependency is a behavioural condition characterised by excessive emotional or psychological reliance on a partner, often seen in relationships involving addiction. Individuals with codependent traits may prioritise the needs of their addicted partners over their own, leading to unhealthy dynamics. The term emerged in the late 20th century, initially in the context of addiction treatment. It was used to describe behaviours observed in spouses and family members of individuals struggling with substance abuse, who inadvertently enabled the addict's behaviour. In the present time, codependency is recognised as a condition that extends beyond addiction-related scenarios. It can appear in relationships with partners, family members, friends and colleagues. Codependency often involves low self-esteem, people-pleasing tendencies, fear of abandonment, and a compulsive need to control others. What we're going to show, the traditional view of codependency said there's an emotional symptoms, excessive need for approval and validation from others, anxiety, guilt or shame when prioritising one's needs, and fear of abandonment or rejection. And then there were behavioural signs: difficulty setting boundaries or saying no, taking responsibility for another person's actions or emotions, neglecting personal needs or interests to focus on the other person, enabling dysfunctional behaviours such as substance abuse or irresponsibility. And in relationship patterns, it involves clinging to unhealthy relationships out of fear of being alone, attempting to fix or rescue others, tolerating mistreatment or abuse, dependency on the relationship for a sense of purpose or identity. And they are the traditional views of codependency. The last traditional views of codependency and addiction look at the characteristics and the impact on the spouse. Characteristics are codependency involving excessive focus on the substance abuser's needs, neglecting the spouse's well-being. Spouses often acted as enablers, allowing the addict to avoid the consequences of their behaviour. Examples include giving money to the addict, covering up their actions, and fulfilling their responsibilities. The impact on the spouse was psychological distress was common, with feelings of guilt, anger, and low self-esteem. Spouses often felt compelled to solve the addict's problems, leading to emotional and physical exhaustion. These are the points on the traditional view of codependency. We now want to move on to Module 2 and have a look at the new version of attachment for 2025. The reason for looking at a new way on attachment is that things are changing all the time. New developments are arising in all areas of psychology. I just wanted to pick one item out of the causes of codependency to have a look at how the original version has changed. If you have a look at that item, causes of codependency, psychological factors, you'll see there's a statement that learned helplessness or a belief that one's worth depends on others' approval was a psychological factor. This term, learned helplessness, was stated by Martin Seligman. He was a significant psychologist in America, and he used that term, learned helplessness, from early in the 1960s and 70s as he studied psychology. But then he put out a book in 2018 and said that that was wrong. There isn't learned helplessness. He's discovered the hope circuit. And his 2018 book explained how that occurred. The point is, the traditional ways of looking at things are changing, and they're changing rapidly. So we have to come up with new ways of defining psychology and applying it in this 2025 year. While it's still true in attachment theory, using the 4 elements of attachment, secure attachment, anxiously attached, avoidantly attached, or disorganized attached, they are still true, valid statements. But we can get a better knowledge of attachment if we look at this 2025 version from the cognitive principle matrix, saying that we go through life in 7 stages of attachment. And how that works is that we move from being unattached when we're born, to attaching to our parents, to detaching from our parents, to attaching to a partner, correcting attachment with a partner, detaching from our human nature, and attaching to our spirit. And we'll explain those 7 levels in the following slides. The years that are stated there are not necessarily physical years, they're emotional years. So for some people, they happen earlier than others because they're more emotionally aware. But we'll have a look at the 7 stages of attachment in the following slides and see how that helps us get an understanding of how codependency works. The 7 stages of attachment. We come into the world unattached, and then between the years 1 to 12, 0 to 12, we attach to our parents. And cognitive principle therapy is based on relationship principles for attachment, which are trust, respect, acceptance, and commitment. They're the 4 main ones. When these are taught to the child, and the child responds back with trust, respect, acceptance, and commitment, then there's secure attachment. If we're unable to learn about secure attachment in these early years, we are likely to develop attachment issues throughout our life. If we're unable to learn secure attachment in these early years, symptoms of anxiousness, avoidant, and disorganized attachment style begin to be present. Between the emotional ages of 13 to 25 years, we break away from our parents and attach to our friends. We are now testing the trust, respect, acceptance, and commitment principles that we've learnt from our parents. If we were insecurely attached, then this will result in conflict as we come in contact with others who have insecure attachment styles. So during this period, it's a period of emotional development and learning and trying to adjust. This stage 4, attachment to a partner, is the most significant stage in understanding codependency. It occurs between the emotional years of 25 to 35 years of age, but it can certainly start younger physical years. Within the intimate relationship, we begin testing our unresolved issues. We select a partner who will have the same weakness we have in trust, respect, acceptance, and commitment, but they'll have the opposing behaviour and how they manage them. So if we're under, we pick someone over to learn from them. So if we're extroverted, we're too much, we're likely to pick an introvert who's too much. If we're too logical, we're likely to pick someone who's too emotional. If we're too trusting, we're likely to pick someone who lacks trust. If we're too easygoing and compliant, we're likely to pick someone who's a bit disrespectful and not compliant. If we're overly acceptance, we're likely to pick someone who's under acceptance. If we overly commit, we're likely to pick someone who undercommits. And the reason for this is so that we grow. So down the bottom, what it says is working towards the middle ground makes the unit of the couple stronger and brings us to a place of acceptance of ourselves with our intimate partner. Working towards the middle ground means that when we have children, those children will be stronger than us, and the bloodline will continue stronger as it has in all animals for all time. However, when we face those options, unless both parties are prepared to change, we can end up with 4 different outcomes. We can both stay stubborn and fight with each other, and nothing gets resolved. One person can try and change the other. That often happens in codependency. The third option is we split up with them. But because they're an unresolved issue and the subconscious mind picks your partner, your subconscious mind picks your partner within 5 minutes of meeting them. You think in your conscious mind you pick them because of the way they look, common values, common interests. But your subconscious mind will pick them because they'll have the opposite behaviour to you, but the same underlying weakness. You won't be aware of this. And during the romantic period, in the first 18 months of the relationship, that's why they call it the romantic period, because your subconscious mind blocks off the weaknesses of your partner. You don't see them. But after about 18 months, they start to come out, the trust issues, the respect issues, the acceptance issues, the commitment issues. This is how life works according to the subconscious mind. It's an instinct. You can't change it. So it's not something that's learnt, that we pick someone because we're poor in our emotional state. We pick someone to grow stronger, and everyone does this. The whole 8 billion people on the planet. It's just that some people have got small emotional issues, small attachment issues, and others have got very large attachment issues. But the process is the same, no matter who we are. Stage 5, correction to attachment. If we haven't successfully resolved our attachment issues with our partner between the age of 25 to 35, we go through a correction to attachment. It's called a midlife crisis. And why does that occur? It occurs in history because normally, going back over hundreds of years, a woman would give birth to a child between the age of 15 to 25. The time the youngest child got to 12 years of age and detached from the mother would be around 35 years of age. When the child is born, the unresolved issues of the mother goes off herself and she focuses on the child. But when the youngest child reaches 12 years of age, the unresolved issues come back as the child detaches. And that's when the midlife crisis normally occurs, because this happens between the age of 35 and 45. And while this is happening to the wife or the mother, the same thing is happening to the father because they follow the same pattern. So what happens in a midlife crisis is the unresolved issues force the person back to the original time in which the issue occurred, which was probably in stage 2 attachment, normally under 16 years of age. And the behaviour can sometimes be like a 16-year-old, the feelings and the emotions and the behaviour. So this is the period where we're reflecting on what went wrong in our previous stage of attachment. How come we couldn't find the middle ground? Who was stubborn? Who couldn't move? Or was it both our responsibilities for not moving? This is a time of reflection. Otherwise, we slip into the midlife crisis and return to the early stage where the successful attachment didn't occur. The slide covers stages 6 and 7. In stage 6, we have to detach from the ego. What we've learned in the addiction course is that if we have unresolved issues, they stay in a shadow. And the ego has got a vested interest in keeping the shadow blocked from being resolved. And the ego wants to hold on to material things because it's driven by greed. So it wants to hold on to the material things of power and money. When that happens, we don't detach from our material self. We struggle to find peace. And so the purpose of stage 6 is to detach from the ego by letting go. And when we let go, we attach to the spirit in stage 7, and we find peace, because the right brain's purpose is to find peace in the gut, love in the heart, joy in the head, and hope in the spirit. So that's the goal of attaching to the spirit in stage 7. We're now looking at the codependency in relationships, the 2025 version. It's different from the original version of codependency because it focuses on a different aspect. We've seen through the attachment theory that the codependent person will pick a partner to make them stronger. If they learn from the partner and the partner is able to change, they will become stronger and the codependency will disappear. But if they pick a partner and that partner can't change or they can't change, then the codependency will continue. So we're now looking at codependency as an addiction model, and we'll show how that works. In the 2025 model of codependency, the cognitive principle theory states that codependency occurs at level 1, where the person has either experienced trauma, major depression, panic attacks, following from a breakdown in the relationship principles of trust, respect, acceptance, commitment, etc. And they've taken it personally, probably because it happened when they were a child and they had very little resistance other than to take it personally, as we've said. When you're under 16, you tend to take all lack of trust, respect, acceptance, and commitment personally. So they've dropped down to level 1 and gone into a false negative. But what they have done is not created their own false positive that reflects on themselves. They found the false positive in another person to maintain the ego through helping or supporting another person rather than themselves, which is the normal case in non-codependency when there's addiction involved. So we'll go on and have a look at how that occurs. Codependency means two people are codependent on each other. For the purpose of simplicity, let's say the codependent person who has the false negative is the female, and the male is the person with a false negative and a false positive of addiction. The person with the false negative, the female, creates a false positive not in herself, but uses the false positive and supports the false positive of the male. So she allows the addiction to continue, covers up the addiction, supports the person with the addiction, trying to fix them. So in terms of control and responsibility, the codependent female will either take a controlling situation, try and control the male, or take a over-responsibility pathway of trying to fix the male. And the male, who's also the codependent with the addiction, the alcoholism or whatever the addiction is, allows the female to take control or to take responsibility. And so there becomes an interdependence based on codependency supporting the ego. So the ego of the female supports the male's false positive, and the ego of the male supports their own false positive and also allows the female to either take control or take responsibility. So you've got this interdependent relationships called codependency. And the only way to fix it, if the both partners can't fix it between themselves, is for both partners to go into an addiction therapy model. So with codependency, we have an enmesh model where you can't identify either partner from the model. It looks like you're looking at one person, because one person will either be controlling, sometimes they'll use anger or abuse, but certainly they'll be controlling. They'll have an addiction, which is a false positive, and the codependent person, which could be both of them, have a false negative, but they're using each other's false positive to cover it up. And so the anger and control feed the addiction feeds the codependency, and the codependency feeds back into the addiction and supports the controlling person. And unless they can resolve this, which after time, if they find they can't, they both need to go into addiction counselling in order to separate themselves and restore their secure attachment.